Okay, so what we're going to work on today is solving absolute value equations and inequalities. So take a look at the try this. It says, what could be the value of x in the equation below? So I have the absolute value of x is equal to 3. So what number could I plug in for x so that this is actually true? So remember what absolute value is. Absolute value is the number of spaces and a number is away from 0 on the number line. So x could either be equal to 3 or x could be equal to negative 3, right? So the absolute value of negative 3, the absolute value of negative 3 is 3, and the absolute value of 3 is equal to 3. So x could be two different numbers. X could be whatever number is out here, the positive, and the opposite of it, the inverse of it. So that would be the reason why, if you remember from last year when you solve absolute value equations, you solve for the equation and then you solve for the inverse. That's the reason why we make two equations. So let's write down some steps. So absolute value equations, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to isolate the absolute value. And then the next thing you're going to do, you're going to make two equations. All right, so let's write that down. Make two equations. Okay, so one of the equations is going to be how it is at this point after you isolate. One is how it is now. And the other is for the inverse. Now, when you do the inverse, only change one side. Only change one side. So close those parentheses over there. All right, and then you're going to solve. And then you must check this. You have to check for extraneous roots. All right, so let's take a look at the first one. Just going to move everything up. All right, so let's take a look at the first example. We have 2 times the absolute value of negative 9x minus 3 plus 4 is equal to 100. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 4. So I have 2 times the absolute value of negative 9x minus 3 is equal to 96. And then to get rid of the 2, remember that's times in there. So divide by 2. So we have the absolute value of negative 9x minus 3 is equal to 48. All right, now after you isolate the absolute value, you're going to make two equations. So one equation is going to be how it is right now. So you can get rid of the absolute value sign. So it's negative 9x minus 3 is equal to 48. And then the other equation is for the inverse. I always like to change the side that doesn't have the absolute value. It doesn't matter, but you change one side, not both. So it's negative 9x minus 3 equals negative 48. And now we're going to solve each one. So on the left side, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. I get negative 9x is equal to 51. Divide both sides by 9. And in a reduced form, you get negative 17 over 3. Or negative 51 over 9. And then on the right side, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So negative 9x is equal to negative 45. Divide by negative 9, we get x is equal to 5. All right, now we need to check. When you check, you always check original. Okay, so you're starting with that. You're going to start by plugging in negative 17 over 3. All right, so I have 2 times the absolute value of negative 9 times negative 17 over 3 minus 3, close the absolute value, plus 4, does that equal 100? All right, so in the absolute value, this here, you could just plug that in your calculator. Plug in negative 9 times negative 17 over 3 minus 3, and you get positive 48. So it's 2 times the absolute value of 48 plus 4 is equal to 100. The absolute value of 48 is 48, so it's 2 times 48 plus 4 equals 100. And then you can plug that into your calculator. We get 100 equals 100, so that checks. And now we're going to try 5. So it's 2 the absolute value of negative 9 times 5 minus 3 plus 4 equals 100. So I have 2 the absolute value of, plug that in your calculator, what's inside the absolute value. You get negative 48 plus 4 equals 100. The absolute value of negative 48 is 48, so it's 2 times 48 plus 4 equals 100. And 100 equals 100, and that checks. All right, so I have 2 answers, negative 17 over 3 and 5. All right, let's try example 2. Okay, so to solve absolute value inequalities. So what you want to do to start off is change the inequality to an equal sign. So that's step 1. Change inequality to equal sign. All right, the next thing is you're going to, it's now for right now, it's going to be the next few steps are the same thing as we did before. So you're going to isolate the absolute value. You're going to make 2 equations. All right, so one equation is for how it is right now. And the other is for the inverse. Okay, number 4, you're going to solve. So that's the same. All right, now this is where it changes. So now you're going, since it's an inequality, there could be more than one answer. So you're going to plot on the number line. You're going to pick test points. And then you're going to shade appropriately. And then make sure you can represent answer multiple ways. And I'll show you the multiple ways. Okay, so let's take a look at the first problem. I'm just going to move everything up. Okay, so let's take a look at the first one. We have the absolute value of negative 10 minus 10x is less than 50. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the inequality to an equal sign. Okay, so now I'm going to make 2 equations, and then we solve it just like we did before. So I have, the first one is going to be negative 10 minus 10x is equal to 50. And then the other one will be negative 10 minus 10x is equal to negative 50. And now we're going to solve. Negative 10x is equal to 60 when I add 10 to both sides. Divide by negative 10, I get x is equal to negative 6. Add on the blue side, add 10 to both sides. I get negative 10x is equal to negative 40. Divide by negative 10, x is equal to positive 4. Okay, so now draw a number line. Plot negative 6 and positive 4. They will be open circles because there's no equal sign underneath the inequality. So it'll be an open at negative 6 and positive 4. And then you're going to pick a test point. I like to pick 0, if it's available. And when I say if it's available, as long as these two numbers aren't 0, it's easiest if you just pick 0. Now 0 is right here in between negative 6 and 4. When I plug in 0 into the original equation, if it works, if it's true, I will shade where the 0 is, which means right in between negative 6 and 4. If it's not true, if it's false, I will shade out. So let's plug it in. Always original. So it's the absolute value of negative 10 minus 10 times 0 is less than 50. So it's negative 10 minus 0 is less than 50. So it's the absolute value of negative 10 is less than 50. The absolute value of negative 10 is 10. less than 50, that is true. So that would mean that I shade in between, like this, because that's where my 0 is. It's right in between. Okay, so now you have to be able to make sure you can represent the answer multiple ways. So I'm just going to move everything up here. Okay. All right, so here's that's a graph. This one here is a graphing solution. Another way you can graph it would be like this. Number line, -6, +4. And using the parentheses brackets. Remember, parentheses means open circle. Means open circle. A bracket is closed circle. Okay, so on the -6, since it's an open circle, we use a parentheses, and they'd be pointing to each other since it's shaded in between, and you would do that. And then another way would be using inequality, so before the absolute value of x such that, since it's shaded in between, you put the x in the middle, and it'd be less than 4 on the right, and greater than -6 on the left. It's always the less than symbols. It uses an equal sign if that's in the original inequality. Small number goes on the left, larger number on the right. Okay, let's try number 2. Okay, so we're going to change the inequality to an equal sign. So it's -2, the absolute value of x minus 8 is equal to -26. You're going to isolate, so divide by -2. So it's the absolute value of x minus 8 is equal to +13. Now make two equations. X minus 8 equals 13. X minus 8 equals -13. So on the left, add 8 to both sides. X is equal to 21. On the right, add 8. X is equal to -5. Okay, number line. We have -5, +21. There is an equal sign underneath, so we will use solid circles. All right, so pick a test point. I'm going to pick 0 because 0 is right in the middle. And I'm going to plug it in now. So it's -2. The absolute value of 0 minus 8 is less than or equal to -26. So it's -2. The absolute value of -8 is less than or equal to -26. The absolute value of -8 is 8. So it's -2 times 8, which is -16. Is that less than or equal to -26? No, that's greater than. So I shade. So this is not true. That's not true. So I don't shade in the middle. I shade going out like this. Right? So I shade on the outside. If that's not true in between, then it has to be true on the outside. Okay? So that's one way to represent the answer. I'm going to move everything up. I'll show you another way. Okay, on the number lines, another graphical solution, -5, 21. So it's an equal sign underneath the inequality. So that means I use bracket. And it's going to the out. So it has to point out like this. That would be on 21. And it would shade out like that. And as a graph, as an inequality before all values of x such that, since it's shaded out, like oars on a boat, you use the word or in between, in the middle. So it'd be x is greater than or equal to 21. And on the left side, it'd be x is less than or equal to -5. Okay, so that's it. We'll practice more in class tomorrow. Have a good night.